And hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Senate videos where we take a look at the Senate races going on across America in 2026 and examine the races and I give my thoughts and analysis on the races. And today we're looking at the Florida special Senate election taking place in 2026. This race is occurring because in January of 2025, Marco Rubio, who was elected to a 6-year term in 2022, resigned to become United States Secretary of State in the second Donald Trump administration. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis appointed State Attorney General Ashley Moody to the Senate seat. Senator Moody is currently serving in her first partial term. In 2020, Donald Trump won the state of Florida by just over 3%. In 2024, he expanded that lead to 13%, so a growth in his margin of victory of 10%, showing the rightward swing of Florida in the past decade. In 2022, the last time this seat was up, Rubio won by 16%. That was his margin of victory when he ran for re-election to a third term in 2022. And as you can see, that shift was well underway by the time between 2020 and 2022. Florida has had a large influx of residents during the pandemic, and most of those voters were right-leaning. Let's take a look at the two nominees. The Democratic nominee is State Representative Angie Nixon, and Angie Nixon is won her primary over Alexander Vindman. And Mr. Vindman, of course, came to fame during the first Trump impeachment and moved to Florida and sought the Democratic nomination for United States Senate. Mr. Vindman's brother is a United States representative from the state of Virginia. And a lot of people, as I said, saw Vindman as the front runner. But Miss Nixon, State Representative Nixon, ran a very grassroots campaign and scored a 13-point decisive victory on election day. And she is much further to the left than Vindman. She joined the Democratic Socialist of America during the campaign and in the legislature has been very vocal in her opposition to the policies of Ron DeSantis and Florida Republicans. Miss Nixon has at times led sit-ins to protest redistricting and also was very on the leading edge of being a loud Democratic opposition to Republican policies. Prior to being elected to public office, she ran various charities and nonprofit organizations in the community that provided meal and literacy resources to people in her community. And she is very much in the mold of a community activist. The Republican nominee is the current appointed Senator Ashley Moody. In the Senate, Moody has been a reliable, as expected, vote for Donald Trump and the Republican Party and has not broken with the president on any major policy. Prior to becoming a senator, Moody was the state attorney general and followed in the mold of many other Republican attorney generals in the country. During Donald Trump's last 2 years of his first term, She supported measures to undercount immigrant populations that the Trump administration supported. She signed on to that ridiculous Texas lawsuit that sought to overturn the 2020 election, and was a staunch ally of Governor DeSantis. She really hitched her wagon to DeSantis, and a lot of people thought that Moody was positioning herself for the obvious next step, and that was to run for governor. But Trump won re-election, and that opened up this Senate seat because Rubio became Secretary of State, and DeSantis rewarded her loyalty by appointing her to the Senate, then which allowed DeSantis to appoint his chief of staff to the Attorney General's office. So there was some horse trading there. She, prior to serving as Attorney General, also was a judge in Florida, was the youngest judge at the time of her election, and ran for her judgeship at the absolute minimum time of being able to become a judge. After 5 years of practice in the state of Florida, you can run for a judgeship, and she ran and won that judgeship, and at the time became the youngest judge in the state of Florida. Moody, during the Biden administration, this is getting back to her time as Attorney General now, followed in the mold of most Republican Attorney Generals. She sued Biden over many policy disagreements and got her name in the news in that manner. And really was part of this aggressive effort to market Florida as Republican Zion. So let's take a look at the two primaries. The Republican primary had about 1.6 million voters in it, or about 56% of the vote, and the Democratic Party had 1.2 million votes in the primary, or 43% of the vote. Like I said, the Democrats had a competitive primary. For Senate, they had a somewhat competitive primary for governor, although there wasn't really any shock at who won. David Jolly, a former Republican congressman who is now a Democrat, won that nomination very easily. On the Republican side, it is a Republican-leaning state, and they had the same situation as the Democrats. There was not really a competitive primary for governor, although their eventual nominee won with less percentage, less than 50% of the vote, and of course, their Senate primary was the appointed senator against a bunch of political unknowns, and she won with Bashar Assad numbers. But 56-43 is the spread there between the two parties in the primary. And that generally is where Florida elections are ending up these days. How do I think this is going to go? I think that while Nixon being the nominee bodes well for other Democrats on the ballot, I think that her presence on the ballot is actually a blessing to David Jolly, although they hold very different views. She is a Black candidate and can help boost African American turnout, and that is very critical in the South for Democrats winning. And I think that she helps in that manner. But I think that the obstacles that Angie Nixon would have to overcome to win this race are really hard to overcome. Not impossible, but very difficult. DSA, probably the worst state in America to run as a DSA candidate, would be the state of Florida. You have a lot of people who have fled Central American countries, such as Cuba, Venezuela, and other places in that region that they lived under socialist regimes, and they do not associate the word democratic and socialism as being positive. Um, and the rightward lean of Florida has just become so pronounced that um, it's hard for any Democrat to get traction, much less an openly um, leftist candidate. So that is my view on the Senate race. Ashley Moody has not done anything that is going to have the floor fall out from under her own Republican turnout. She has been firm in her support of Trump and Trump administration policies, and Republicans will be there for Moody in the Senate race. So my belief at this time is that Moody's going to be elected to the remainder of his term. Obviously, if I see anything that changes, or I see the race possibly moving in another direction, I'll make another video and explain the circumstances as to why. But at this time, Florida has just become such a reliable Republican state that no Democrat in my mind, especially an openly far left candidate like Nixon, is going to have a shot at winning. So that is my view on the Senate race in Florida, the special election. Um, we will have others that we will look at in the coming weeks and months. We've got Ohio, which is a special coming up. So I will see you all then. Until then, peace out, buttercups.